This is the 3 Bucket Podcast number 5 with me, Aditya Dewan. Far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small, unregarded yellow sun. Orbiting this, at a distance of roughly 92 million miles, is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet, whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think that digital watches are a pretty neat idea. This planet has, or rather had, a problem, which was this. Most of the people on it were unhappy for pretty much all of that time. Many solutions were suggested to this problem, but most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper, which is odd, because on the whole, it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. And so the problem remained. Lots of people were mean, and most of them were miserable, even the ones with the digital watches. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they'd all made a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place. And some said that even the trees had been a bad move, and no one should have ever left the oceans. This is the opening of perhaps one of the greatest books ever written, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. We, as a society, have gotten so caught up in the day-to-day trees of life that we have forgotten the forest, the purpose of existence for what it's worth. Who are we? Why are we here? And what happens if we can change our identities? What happens when we can break the code of our lives itself and restructure it in any way that we want to? Today, we have someone who might hold the answers to these profound questions. Jibraan Kadri is a 17-year-old working on using CRISPR to create non-allergenic peanuts, potentially ridding ourselves of COVID, and even getting rid of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. He's written multiple articles on these topics and is well experienced in this field. Jibby, so glad to have you on, man.
Thank you so much, Aditya. Before we even get started, man, I still have chills after that intro. I don't even think you could have written it. That was impactful. I'm pretty sure everyone watching this right now is like, what? I have to re-listen to that. Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons that it's regarded as the best book of all. I think it's Elon Musk's favorite book as well.
I haven't actually read it. I've heard a lot about it from science nerd people. But yeah, I know it's a really iconic book for sci-fi and all that stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think one of the reasons it's so appealing is mainly because it puts Earth in a third person point of view. So there's not really it's told from the perspective of another galaxy, I believe, or another planet in another galaxy. It's insane.
That's pretty cool. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So I guess to start things off, what really intrigued you about the field of gene editing, right? Because if you look at most of the experts on this planet, they always have an epiphany, or not even an epiphany, but something that draws them towards their domain of expertise, right? For Elon Musk, I think it was when there was this Bill Gates, for example. I think Bill Gates and his partner saw a computer and immediately there was okay, let's code BASIC for it. And then Microsoft was born from that. And then Elon Musk had this thing where I think when he was 12, he was coding a video game, which got published in a local paper.
Mm-hmm.
So what was that aha moment for you that, okay, gene editing is the way to go?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I haven't, of course, reached that point in my life yet where I'm yes, this is what I'm going to be. I'm going to be a gene editor. I'm still 17. I still have a long way to go. So I don't think I've fermented it as Elon Musk, how he's the guy that builds rockets and the guy that also does stuff with AI and the guy that also does stuff with finance and the guy, yeah, you know what I mean, right? I don't think I'm at that stage yet. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot. I'm still exploring, but I get your question, which is what just basically intrigued me about the field of gene editing itself, right? And like, yeah, I've only really been doing this for like the past, like, I don't know, like few months, like since September, and this is like what, this is June now. So I didn't really dive into gene editing knowing too much about it, like either. I just kind of one day saw a video about it and I was like, you know what, this might be kind of cool to dive into. But so what really interests me about gene editing is like the fact that we have, or like we're able to like like as you said, like deconstruct lives or like just life as a whole into like these blocks, right? A, C, T, and G, like DNA. And of course, like not all life is like DNA. It's kind of a cliche. There's more to life than like just DNA. But a pretty big freaking part of life is DNA, right? And like the fact that like we actually can edit it, and the fact that not even we can just edit it, but like we can edit it, and like it's not like we're just like randomly pulling like switches and levers, even though like we kind of are, but we like there's actually kind of like still a method to the madness. But even despite all that, it's like we have like actually made like changes. Like we've gene edited crops to like be better against certain pests or be better in certain climates, right? Grow with less water. Like imagine just like telling someone, I don't know, like a long time ago that like, hey, I have this thing that like can make this plant grow with like 10 times less water, and they're like, what, are you like a magician or something? So yeah, like, so gene editing is just really crazy, just because like life, which is like probably like the least quantifiable thing, because you think about the like sciences, right? You have like math is in the science, but like, you know, like that sort of stuff. So you have math, then physics is basically just applied mathematics, chemistry is just applied physics, and then biology is at the very top, which is like applied, like, you know, everything. So it's literally the least sort of like numerical field of science. And the fact that now we're able to break it down into these like bits where you can just like edit them and like manipulate them, basically like numbers or like code. It's like we literally made DNA code. That's what just really fascinated me. It's quite crazy that we can like actually manipulate stuff. And there's even another point that I kind of wanted to make. So it's still like a side tangent, but it's like, how much do we actually like know? Like, sure, there's DNA, and sure, we've called it like, you know, A, C, T, and G, but how much of it has just been like random consequence of like just guessing and like pointing your finger and shooting and being like, oh, like this is like probably how this works, and it turns out like that's kind of is how it works. But like I don't know, like humans think we're like so smart and like we know so much about like life and stuff, even though I think most of it has just been like random like assumptions being made, and like we don't like actually truly, because we still have like so much that we don't know about life, right? And it's like we've created these stories for ourselves about life and how life is, and each time we find this new piece of information, we create a complete, if it doesn't fit with our old story, we create a completely different story. And then story is like, you know, a theory and stuff, so you create like a completely different theory, a completely different story that fits in with like the new information that you just like found, right? So right now the story that we have might not even be the true story. Maybe like the true story is something completely different, and we've only really uncovered, you know, a piece of the pie, and like from that we've derived this story. But like this might not even be the way that life really is. Like maybe it's not A, C, T, and G, maybe it's like strings, right? Like string theory or something, I don't know. But like it's that's something like, it's kind of a tangent, but it's like something I thought about. It's like, is it actually like A, C, T, and G? Because like, you know, God or whoever, like, you know, however like we want to think about it, like were they really just like, yeah, I'm gonna be cool and like be like A, C, and T, G, like that's what life is gonna be, right? But what's funny now too is I saw this video the other day, like TED Talk video, someone sent it to me, and there's this scientist, I forget where he is, I think he's in the US somewhere, but what he's doing is he's actually making synthetic bases. So he's actually adding letters to the DNA code. So I think he's added like a base X and a base Y, and I think the base Z and like another pair, but it's absolutely insane. Wow. And with new bases, you can create, because how it works, right? DNA goes from DNA to mRNA, and then mRNA gets translated into protein, right? And mRNA, the way it gets translated into protein is that each 3 blocks of bases codes for a specific amino acid. But with completely new bases, you can get completely new amino acids, like literally like rewriting, not even rewriting, like adding to the, like, you know, adding to life. Wow. So just like that even being a thing, it's like, do we even really know the story, or is there like more to the story that we don't know? And is there even stuff that we can add on to the story, as like people in the story? So yeah, that's kind of a side sort of tangent, but yeah, it's just I've always thought about it.
Wow. That literally is like such a profound like idea, right? Especially because I think we've only really discovered DNA in the last I think 50 years, like half a century.
Yeah, it's not been that long.
Right? Exactly. And it was only like less than a decade ago that they actually discovered like, oh hey, CRISPR exists.
Yeah, 2012.
And it's just it's just completely insane. Like if someone were alive 50 years ago, right? And they thought the code for life was completely like DNA didn't exist, right? And in 50 years it changed so rapidly. And I mean, as you were mentioning, like the second you get a new piece, the entire puzzle basically needs to change, right? And like now we've obviously gotten more accurate. Like we have some parts of it right, because otherwise I feel like a lot of our therapies and things wouldn't really work to their fullest extent. But even now, as we were mentioning, the fact that you can create new bases, like if that's like, okay, that's like you have code for life. Instead of just editing code, you're like adding a new function, like a set of new
not even a new
functions.
function. It's like you're creating a new type of variable. You know how you have string, doubles, and like integers, right? Let's say you add like, I don't know, like some unknown variable that's like completely new. And it's not like like it's insane. Like you're literally like rewriting the fundamental building blocks. It's like in binary you add like the number 2 to like binary. It's like that. It's like it's crazy. Yeah.
Wow. Like imagine what we could do with that kind of a thing. Like if you just code a new block, like would that create like entirely new amino acids that we've never seen before?
Yeah, pretty much. And it's not like you just can like do it, like you can make a new block. There's actually like it's carefully like done. Like he selected the bases like carefully, and he selected it. Like I have no idea how that scientist like was able to like actually like make it work and like actually create new amino acids, because that's like what? It's literally like it's crazy. But like some of the applications are like creating synthetic organisms, and he's already made like synthetic like single cell organisms, which is I can't even believe that he's already done that. This is not even like recent. This isn't even like like this year or like last year. This is from like a few years ago. I think 2017, 2016, around that time. So I don't even know where this guy is like right now. But yeah, I forget where he's from, but like one of the things he brought up is like you can make like synthetic organisms that are dependent on like nutrients, or not nutrients, but like resources that are previously considered like toxic and stuff. So you can make organisms that thrive on things like oil, thrive on things like plastic, thrive on things like stuff like that. I don't see how you can't do that with gene editing right now, but I haven't like looked into it too deeply. But that's what he was kind of mentioning, is like you can literally just do that and like in a second like just make them go like poof all of a sudden, like because you're literally making life. And I think that's also another reason why gene editing was like. It's interesting. It's also kind of scary that like we have this power now. I put power in quotations because it's like we're not actually making life, because we still have no idea what's actually like really going on. We're still like kind of guessing. But like of course there's like a lot of like quote unquote evidence. I still like evidence, sure, about this stuff. But like in actuality, like fundamentally, like we have no idea like how these things happen. They just happen. And we're just literally observing these things and writing them down and making stories out of them.
Yeah, that's a good way to like explain the field of science as
science.
a whole. Just
that's really
writing
science.
things down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, it's insane. Like we could do an insane amount of things with that. Like you're literally engineering. I still like. Honestly, whenever I hear gene editing, I feel like now the term is a little bit normalized, like even schools teach it now. But it like, I still personally can't get over the fact that we somehow managed to change an organism. Like even if it was wrong, as you were mentioning, like it's just completely random, the fact that you were able to influence an organism in some way, like despite that, is just crazy. Like I mean, I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's going to lead to a dystopia, gene editing, we're all like kind of screwed, right? But I do also think that maybe discovering gene editing is like a natural step in evolution, right? Because obviously if you think about like life forms, once you discover like the basic principles of like math, science, and then you discover like language before that, obviously, right? And then once you write things down, once the computer is invented, things like that, then it's basically just like you're going to want to learn more about everything, right? So you learn more about the body. And if DNA like really is the right piece of the puzzle that we're looking at, then it's like a natural step that you want to change it, if you know what I'm saying.
Interesting. So it's like, do you think it's like a stepping stone to evolution? Like getting, but like what even is like evolution too? It's like evolution, it sounds like it's this predetermined staircase that leads to us being like highly evolved, but like that means like someone had to build that staircase, right?
Yeah. Okay, you're just blowing my mind today.
So like
someone had to build
if that's the way like that you're describing like that evolution, it's like this like the next step for like evolution, but it's like I don't think it's necessarily the next step for evolution. It might just be that like we're growing smarter, but at the same time I think evolution as a whole, I think actually as we progress throughout society, we think we're actually, this is another tangent, but it's like we think we're getting smarter, but I actually think we're shooting ourselves in the foot even more. Like look, like 10,000 years ago or whatever, like long time ago from now, like the earth was in a much better place, right? People like
true.
as on average had a lower quality of life, yes, but in terms of like average like happiness level, I mean it's just hard to like kind of determine, but I just think like problems as a whole have actually like gone up. Like we've solved a bunch of problems, but I think the way humans solve problems is really different from the way nature solves problems, right? And the way we solve problems is like most of our problems, and now we're like focusing on like sustainable problems, but I think everything inevitably, like this world is just full of problems, like perpetually. So you try to solve one thing, you're gonna create 3 other problems out of that, right? Look at genetics, like genetics is an example, right? Oh, wow, genetics so cool. We can like not solve, but like cure sickle cell, anemia right now, or like even possibly cure cancer one day. But with that also comes the thing of like designer babies and like eugenics and living in a dystopian world, which is something you brought up, right? So yeah, we've solved one thing, but we've also created like 15 other different problems, right? And that's the theme with everything. Look at computers, right? Computers, wow, internet, so cool. But then like you also have like cyberbullying and like people like even worse stuff, dark web stuff, like all like, so so every solution brings with it problems. So I think in terms of like evolution being like a natural sort of step to like us getting smarter, I think as we even progress throughout the world and we learn more things, I think like we're actually just like actually shooting ourselves in the foot even more. And this isn't to say like we should stop exploring, but it also kind of is in a sense. I don't know, it's a really interesting thing about like maybe like but I think like we will have an inevitable end where we'll just like discover things until like there's just more problems than solutions. It's like it's a completely different conversation, but like that's I haven't even like thought about it fully. So some of the things I might be saying I might actually like retract, but I'm kind of just like literally just like letting my brain out right now.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense though. Like I think what you've done is that I think you've just kind of discovered like a fundamental principle of reality, and that is that suffering exists in this world, right? Like no matter what you do, like it's kind of chaos and order, right? There's 2 sides to everything, and the reality is that since the beginning of time there have been problems, and there will continue to be like problems, right? And I think part of finding the solution isn't to solve the problem of chaos permanently, but it's more just like, hey, how can we minimize suffering on this planet? Right? Like, if you think back 1,000 years ago, right? Like, definitely your argument that people might have been happier, I think that is definitely true. But what's funny is that the problems that we have today, right? The fact that we're dealing with like, world hunger is a huge problem, that cancer is a huge problem. The fact that we think that these are problems is an indication that humanity is making progress, basically. Because 2,000 years ago, you were too busy starving and worrying about what you would probably feed your kids like in the next 2 days, than rather worrying about like, what's gonna happen to the people on the other side. Like you don't have time to worry about that, basically, right? Like your problems are in the here and the now. And I think what we've done that's really interesting is found a way to change our problems and make them like they're obviously still serious, But the fact is that now we have time to worry about things like equality in our societies, right? Which is obviously really important. But if you're being chased by lions and you're constantly at war with other city-states, you don't really have time for that kind of thing. So it's crazy to think about it. That like even though their problems are no matter how big our problems might seem today, it's like they were bigger like the problems themselves were bigger 2,000 years ago. Like our feelings this is kind of where I was like kind of backtracking a little bit, is that I realized that the problems themselves might be bigger, but the human perception is kind of the same, right? Like humans kind of feel the same way to a problem, so you wouldn't really feel the difference. Like like if I dropped world hunger in front of someone like who hasn't experienced problems before in their life, that'd be huge because they're basing that off of it's completely relative, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I had a thing like you were talking about we have like our problems are perpetual and we're working towards minimizing suffering. I think even like this like other than like physically solving like world hunger, like getting everybody food and stuff, or like world hunger is like an example, but like I think just like mentally embracing suffering is a way to end or minimize suffering, right? If you turn suffering into something else, like if you like, and you can turn energy into anything, right? So if you think of suffering as like energy, you can turn that energy into like inspiration or like a spark for something, right? That's what like that's literally like entrepreneurship, right? So I think even like mindset shifts are also like another option to like minimizing suffering. We think of like, oh yeah, we got to solve this problem and stuff, but as you said, even if we have lesser problems today, our mindset or like our perception of the problem is still the same, and that's based off of our mindset, right? So
absolutely,
I think the key is actually just embracing the suffering, because it is there.
I would argue. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm done.
Yeah, I was gonna say that like what you're saying about mindset being like another solution, I think that is the only solution. Yeah. Right? Because everything you feel is inside your head. It's all just perception, it's neurons firing in your brain. Like, the only way to you can never get rid of suffering, but the only way to, like, minimize it or make it help you, like, something that you actively seek that helps you, that propels you to a higher level, that is, like, a huge mindset shift. And I think that's kind of what people today are starting to realize, like, especially I think there's this guy Jordan Peterson. Well, first of all, he's a fantastic like professor, and like some of the things he says is just mind-blowing. He's interesting. And yes, guy. I'm a little bit of a I'm a little bit of a fanboy. That's not the point. But like one thing that he mentioned that really stuck with me was the fact that the way you get rid of chaos like outside the world is by first setting your own home in order. The fact, like, everyone's chaos that's inside their own lives is what adds up to create global chaos. Which, for me, was, that's kind of one of those moments, like, where you sit down and realize, okay, the fact that my desk is messy might actually be contributing to the suffering of this planet.
Yeah. On a minuscule scale, it kind of does, because, like, let's say you were, like, less productive because of your desk, and that, like, little bit less of productivity led to like a chain reaction that like would have if you were that much more productive, that might have like led to some other outcome or something, right? Like,
holy crap.
Yeah. So that actually might be true. It's kind of like, but it's still pretty minuscule though. It's like your like the Earth's pull on you versus like your pull on the Earth, right? It's literally minuscule. It's like 10 to the negative 26 or something, like newtons. It's crazy small, but it still exists, right? So yeah. And that's interesting. Really
those
crazy.
Things
like
compound.
The fact that like if your home, like the fact that your home or like your mindset, right, is bad contributes to like the rest of the world being bad. Because we always all of our senses, right, are external, right? We don't really have anything internal. Definitely. So like we have like 5 senses that are external. We only have one thing that's internal, right? Our nose faces outward, our mouth faces out, like everything faces outwards, right? But like the real problem we're not looking at is actually like inside of us, right?
Yes.
So I think that's like actually a really like, big realization too. I think even saying that like out loud right now is like, oh shoot, like that's pretty deep, right? But I think like that's really like what, because we're born with these senses, we're only like seeing these, right? So it's not like you don't come into the world knowing that, hey, the real problem is inside of me. That you kind of have to discover that. I think as you mature as well, you discover that, and like as you talk to more people, you learn that.
Wow. That's actually such a profound way of putting it. Like, all your senses are external, but the real one that matters is the one that's internal. Holy
I wouldn't say the real one that matters, but the one that we ignore the most, that actually ends up after so long compiling into like this like angry beast that is like actually like you said, your house, right? That it actually is in the end the one that is the most heavy in terms of negativity.
Yeah, it's like the biggest load. And what's really interesting is that those like minor chaos, say like, you know, your desk is like, it doesn't really seem consequential. But what's interesting is that what if everyone, like, okay, I'm gonna move outside the example of a desk because I feel like that's a little bit too trivial. But like, let's say that like, what if everyone's houses were in disarray? What if everyone was having trouble with relationships with like other people, right? Like there's nowadays like people are very, very like it's a common trope to have a failed relationship. It's more likely that a relationship fails than not. I mean, I think that's with anything. But especially with like human relations nowadays. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, I'm saying like I've been around for like 4 years at this point. But you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
I feel like if everyone's houses are in disarray just a little bit, that compounds so quickly. Like 7 billion people. If each of them contribute 1% to suffering, it's like that's a little bit too much.
Not even 1%. Like it wouldn't be 1%. It'd be like 1 over 7 billion or something. But exactly.
Yeah, true. That's still an insane amount, and that's like.
I mean, think about it. Like even just that.
Yeah.
1 over 7 billion, right? And 7 billion people add, like even if you contribute 1 over 7 billionth of a thing to the world, and everybody does that. Yeah. That's 100% complete catastrophe everywhere, right? Like think about that.
Yeah.
You said desk, right? I would say desk is still like 1 over maybe like 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. 1 over 7 billionth, right? Like that's inconceivably small. You can't even imagine how small. Maybe that's literally like kicking a rock, or even like something that tiny, right? And if everybody did that, of course, everybody has to do it. And that leads to like the entire world. So yeah, it really is like the little, like actually the little things do matter in life. It's the little things. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I mean, I guess like an action item for the people listening to this right now, just look 360 degrees around you. Like, is there anything that'll take less than 30 seconds to fix? If yes, just fix it. Minimize the suffering on this planet, please.
Yeah, maybe it's like your hair. Maybe it's like the way. Maybe it's like your shoe rack or something. Yeah.
And what's interesting is that those smaller things give you the motivation to not necessarily. I mean, I don't really like the word motivation, but they give you the boost you
momentum,
need
inertia.
to attack the bigger problem. Momentum. Yeah, that's a much better word. Like you clean your desk. Okay, cool. Maybe tomorrow, like instead of cleaning your desk, you clean maybe your entire room, right? And the day after that, it's like, okay, I clean my room. I mean, not the day after, but eventually it's like
progress.
You start fixing core elements of your life. Like you sit down and realize my desk was messy. Oh, what else is messy? Maybe it's like my relationship with someone, right? Maybe you contact them, maybe you chill out with them, maybe you fix that. Maybe it's like, okay, my career is going downhill. I'm at like the bottom of the dominance hierarchy. Help, right? Then you start solving your life's problems one at a time, and it's just huge butterfly effect right there.
Yeah, and like as you're saying, like solve your desk, solve your internal, and then eventually solve the world, right? That's like kind of the end goal. And it really is the end goal. And I think another thing too, like I wanted to bring up is I've seen this clip on YouTube. Some people listening to this might have also seen it. You might have also seen it, Addy. But it's like this retired Navy SEAL officer, and he said one of like the biggest wisdoms he had after doing all that training and stuff is like making your bed, because making your bed, it gives you like the fact you've done something like in the middle, even though it's so minuscule, right? It goes back to the whole point of like minuscule things. Even just making your bed, as minuscule as it is, it's a boost of productivity. Just like you've done something in the day, you've accomplished something, right?
Yeah.
That gives you momentum, because this is the thing, right? Objects at rest stay at rest. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. So the hardest part is starting that motion, right? Which could be as small as making your bed, but it's infinitely better than not doing anything in the day, right? Because like at rest you stay at rest. If you're not at rest, you start moving, right? So like something like that. And then at the end of the day too, like another added bonus is that like you come to your bed and you're like, wow, like it's a nice clean bed, I can like, you know, go rest and stuff. And yeah, it's kind of something I wanted to bring up. Yeah
no, that's kind of like the point behind this. Like, you can minimize the suffering on this planet by doing inconsequential things. I think that's kind of like what happened with science, and like going back to the topic of gene editing, I think that's kind of what happened there too, right? Like, small scientific discoveries over the course of like 10,000 years compounds and leads to what we have to do. Like, I don't know who this quote was by. I think Paul Graham mentioned in one of his articles, but if you like really think about it, you can't walk from your bed to the door without like stopping for the rest of your life admiring all the different inventions, right? Like, I'm looking around me, there's like a fan. I'm just imagining like plastic took thousands of years for humans to figure out. Yeah. Then we figured out like buttons. Someone might have thought of that. Lights, electricity. Someone might have thought air, fan blades, and then the motor, the AC and DC. Like, I'm literally ranting for 5 minutes on just one object.
Wow.
Like, it's insane.
Yeah, that is quite, and the fact that like we're not, you know, like living in jail or something because like World War II didn't have like end up the other way. But yeah, so
yeah, it's like all these tiny things, and I think that's one thing that I think a lot of people are fearing with gene editing is that it's really small right now, right? Like, oh, you changed a base, oh, you made a new like microbe, but over time these small changes compound, and it's just like, what is the future of this technology? I think that's kind of what I wanted to ask you. Like, what do you think is the potential at stake here?
Yeah. So I mean, great segue into that for sure. I think there's there's two sides to it, right? There's the side of like, this is gonna cure disease. This is gonna like, you know, cure cancer, sickle cell anemia, like all that jazz. But there's also the thing of like, you know, this is gonna cause designer babies, like eugenics, a society where we value certain traits and like only the rich will, you know, prosper and stuff. So I think that's also why there's been sort of like a attempt at least to like pause the rapid progression of gene editing, right? Like, that's why that scientist, if you guys like don't know, like there was a scientist in China who basically like, you know, was doing some experiments on his own, and he made like genetically modified like, you know, embryos, and that sparked a lot of, you know, not anger, but just like dismay in the community. So there's been a pause button because and this is like what Jennifer Doudna as well, who like one of the discoverers of CRISPR, she's really like you know, advocated for like getting everybody's voice into this like debate. And like, I've talked to people who have been in the field, and like that really like hasn't happened yet. Like, people aren't, because it's like you have to ask like the entire world, like, hey, is this a good idea or a bad idea? Like, it's a really like sort of even split almost, right? But it goes back to like, is it like just inevitable? Like, are we going to end up in a world anyway where like the rich are going to be like that, and like it's going to be like we value? I mean, are we not already doing that in a sense too? It's like some people, like when they're getting married, right? Like they look for like certain traits in other. I mean, not everybody, but like in some cultures, it's like if you have like light skin, for instance, right? It's considered like, oh, very beautiful. In a long time ago, like back to like Victorian times, I think like women who were, you know, a bit more stocky than the regular one, like that was considered beauty back then. The standard of beauty was completely different, right? So even beauty as a thing is, I'm not saying it's like the correct way, but it is like still a selection method for like high standards, right? So yeah, I think maybe that's just beauty is going to be transferred into like this sort of like median if it goes that way. But yeah, with gene editing, like it's another thing too, right? Like with every technology, with everything, like we mentioned, there is going to be the good and it is going to be the bad. With every problem solved, with every solution, there's going to be 3 others that are out there, right? So I don't think it's like whether it's either like good or bad. I think it's good and bad. I think that's what's going to happen eventually. Like, sure, we want to try and like stay away from the bad, but I think it's just like honestly like a really, really big task to get literally everybody. It's pretty much impossible to get everybody's voice on it, right? So yeah, I think and I think there's no way we can't not use gene editing in the future, because it's like there's too many benefits to like ignore just like that and throw away. So I think it's inevitable that the future of gene editing is that we're gonna have like good sides to it, and there's also gonna be bad sides. Even with antibiotics, right? And I think even with gene editing, there's also probably going to be like we can already see bad things happening with it right now, but like there might even be problems that we don't see right now that once we start using a bit more, we'll see. Like with antibiotics, right? We were like, oh yeah, antibiotics are cool. Maybe there's like a few people that were like skeptical about it, like anti-vax people, but maybe like, but now we have the issue of antimicrobial resistance, right? Where it's like bacteria are gaining resistance to antibiotics, and we're probably going to end up reaching a point where bacteria gain resistance to these antibiotics faster than we can create new antibiotics. So stuff like that, problems that arise once we delve into the solution like wholeheartedly. So I don't think eugenics is the only problem out there. There might be more problems, but like that's literally just life. There's problems everywhere, forever. You can't stop it. You just gotta embrace it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's kind of what part of the progress, right? Like adopting on any new technology or any new means of like progress is a risk in it of itself, right? Like you're taking the risk that this technology might blow everything up, but at the same time, it's also like, if you don't take that risk, then you also sacrifice the good with the bad, and you kind of just stay the same. Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's really interesting, like specifically with the gene editing field, is the fact that, as you were mentioning, we're already doing kind of the things that gene editing we're doing, but we just do it at a slower pace, right? Like especially like as you were mentioning with like beauty standards and things like that. Even with like crops, humans have been doing natural selection for literally why did I say hundreds of thousands? We haven't been around for that long. Yes, no, I think the agricultural revolution was like 1,000. No, wait.
It was a long time ago.
Okay, you know, I need to get my facts right.
It was a long time ago. Let's keep it like that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I think what's really interesting is the fact that even if gene editing like is like one thing you were mentioning with the scientist. Right, I think one of the main problems that the community had was, I mean, definitely the fact that he was already editing on humans is problematic, like especially when most people aren't even aware. I mean, they are aware, but they don't understand the technology fully. What was interesting was that he was, I think, hiding the unethical practices of his lab from local law enforcement, like on repeated checks. And that was just crazy to me. Like, you're here basically responsible in a way, like as you were saying, like everyone's responsible for reducing suffering, right? Mm-hmm. Like one of his actions can, especially because he's in a position of power, right? He's a scientist, he's doing research. Like one of his actions could have effectively like revealed something new or put the people at risk on a smaller scale, or like, I don't know, right? The potential is literally endless. And the fact is, like, then why wouldn't you like be cautious? Obviously, like it might have potential, but
I mean, there's always, I wouldn't say like evil in this world, but like, I wouldn't say that scientist was like evil in a sense. I think he was just like extremely curious, but that's the thing too. It's like, you can have good intentions, but like, there's always going to be good and bad in this world. And even if you don't mean to cause bad, maybe just like the universe needs more bad and your good intention led to like that added badness in the universe. So maybe that scientist like was just caught in that, you know, unfortunately. And like, I mean, yeah, he probably like should have known better to like not to be doing that. He probably like knew that it was kind of like, you know, not ethical. But yeah, like that's how it's gonna be. And we kind if we like embrace it that way and like you know what, like there is gonna be problems. Like it is gonna like be like this. How can we like then embrace it? Because you can't put it away. Like we said, right? You can't like whatever. You have to embrace it. So
can't lock it in the cupboard.
Yeah, we got to figure out how to embrace it.
Definitely. Yeah, actually, this segues like I think pretty nice. Like you were mentioning about antibiotic resistance, right? And I think you've made like a company with a couple of your friends around that. So yeah, tell me more about it. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, funnily enough, yes, perfect segue again. So yeah, me, a couple of friends. Their names are Val and Anush. I met them through a program called the Knowledge Society. And in that, it's basically like I don't know if you've already talked about it, but in the podcast, but it's basically an awesome program for like 13 to 17 year olds, and they're like using emerging technology to like basically create change in the world, teach us like mindsets and stuff. Not sponsored, don't worry, I'm not getting paid for this. Yeah, but no, it's honestly like, so part of that program we did something called a moonshot like challenge or hackathon. I don't know what it's called, but moonshot, we were making moonshot companies. So yeah, we made a company, called it Blasteria, and I'll go into why, maybe you can figure it out on your own, but essentially, yeah, we dove into how we can use, and it's still a moonshot idea, which means it's not like achievable right now, but maybe within 5 to 10 years, once technology progresses a bit, and not like irrationally progresses, but like, predictably like progresses, it would actually be possible. So, anyways, the idea was around using ultrasound waves to destroy antimicrobial bacteria. So the way you're thinking about it is like, how can we tackle AMR for sure, like antimicrobial resistance? Yeah. And one of like the, I guess, cool, or like not cool, but like the more popular methods right now people are looking into is phage therapy. So using bacteriophages, which are bacteria's natural predators. Like I think every single like day, half the population, or like 70% of the bacterial population in the oceans die from bacteriophage. I don't even know like how they're still alive if it's more than 50% like decay rate. But yeah, anyways, so yeah, that's like one way, like using phages and engineering them, because they can't harm our cells, they will only harm the bacteria. But yeah, so we looked into like different ways. So I had this like, literally like shower thought about like, you know how like when an opera singer sings, right? Like she breaks glass, right? So actually she's at like at a certain frequency, like glass shatters, right? And I was like, why is that? Like, so I watched a few videos, I Googled, and there's something called resonant frequencies. So I looked a bit into resonant frequencies, and I'm like, okay, like does everything have a resonant frequency? Like does like my desk have a resonant frequency? Does my hand have a resonant?
This is the best shower thought in the history of mankind.
I have a lot of interesting shower thoughts. Yeah, but so anyways, and good thing I wrote this down because I would have forgotten, but I have a lot of unwritten down that I forgot. Anyways, so I was like, maybe like does everything have a resonant frequency? And if yes, can we like target them specifically? So like let's say like do things like proteins and atoms and certain molecules have resonant frequencies, like even toxic ones, right? Like maybe there's like a protein that is essential in like bacterial metabolism, and using its specific resonant frequency, we can shatter only like it specifically, right? And that would just cause the entire like bacteria to disintegrate. And that we can do that for like anything, even like phages, for instance, right? And of course, even with this, there's like the negative side, because it could be used for like war and just like melting humans or something, right? So, yeah, I might have just sparked on like, World War III right there. Extremes. But yeah, so stuff like that, I think, so we dove into that, and it turns out like, yes, everything does have a resonant frequency, but we kind of strayed away from resonant frequencies, and we looked into actually just something called microbubbles. So microbubbles are microscopic bubbles, and what they do essentially is that at certain frequencies of ultrasound, they can resonate in certain ways. So and this resonant is either non-inertial or inertial. So non-inertial is, you can imagine like let's say you have like a water balloon, right? And you like tap the water balloon, it kind of like shakes inside. You're not bursting the water balloon, but you're kind of like causing these like micro vibrations within it, right? But like when in a bubble, right? Bubbles are gas surrounded by liquid, right? Yeah. So when the bubble vibrates, so there's like this gas vibrates, it causes these mini vibrations around it. And there's been research that's looked in. This is like from like a long time ago too. There's been research, or like it's been looked into that these vibrations can actually cause certain effects on things around it. So they've looked into like using non-inertial cavitation, which is the proper name for it, and like how it can affect the cell walls of bacteria. So one study, it can actually show that at specific frequencies, you can make the cell walls of bacteria more permeable, or even like cells, for instance, which means that like a application of this would be like injecting microbubbles, resonating them, and then having like drugs delivered into these cells, because like they're more permeable, right, to like allow for stuff to come in. But we strayed away from that too, and we looked into like inertial cavitation, which is like if you burst the water balloon basically, and at these extremely tiny like scales, even though it's super tiny, they pack a big punch. So I think it's like when the bubbles burst, they cause like microjets and like shock waves to form around it. So it's like literally like a mini like nuclear bomb, not nuclear bomb, like an explosion, right? Okay. And it's a pretty big explosion. I think like the temperature, of course, it's a really like for a short time, but the temperature in that instant at like on the explosion is around like 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is insane, right? And if you guys have ever seen Or if you ever seen like a ship rotor, right? Like like the rotors that boats have to propel them. Like after like 10 years or something, right? They're all like chipped away and rusted. That's not through that's not through like erosion or whatever. That's through microbubbles. And that's through a different type of cavitation known as hydrodynamic cavitation. But that's through microbubbles. So if microbubbles can do that to a ship rotor made out of metal, imagine what it can do to bacteria. And of course, like there's ways to like target specifically bacteria, not our cells, but that's sort of a not a high level overview. I kind of went deep there. Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's okay. First of all, I just want to say, like, it's very spectacular to see how you can go from a random shower thought, like, okay, you know what, singers are breaking things from glasses, and just find a solution to a problem that could kill, like, hundreds of millions. Like, just the link. And I think that's one thing that's really interesting, is the fact that probably the best ideas come from these, like, absolutely otherworldly sources, which you would think have no business generating these kinds of ideas. Like our moonshot, for example, was on thermonuclear reactors. So okay, I'm not gonna like go super deep into this, but because that would take some time. But TLDR is that the way nuclear reactors work is, you basically, like, you have to get uranium, right? And the point is that you're doing nuclear fission, so then uranium atom splits repeatedly. And then the point is that heat surrounding water, then the water will boil into high pressure steam, which turns a turbine, and finally you have your electricity. So I think the way that we kind of started off with it was like, we were thinking of something else. I think it was like underwater nuclear reactors, or like making them super small. I don't know what even happens, but at least for me, like in my brainstorming session, I was like, okay, underwater nuclear reactors, right? And I have like this picture of like an ocean kind of thing next to me, and I'm like, okay, water. And I was just like repeating it in my head repeatedly. Then I'm just like, okay, what uses water on this one? I'm like, wait, nuclear reactors use water, right? Then I'm like, wait, why do they use water? And then the idea is kind of just like, wait, why don't we just skip that entire process? Yeah. Let's just go directly from fission to the electricity part, right? So it's crazy. The most your brain will link, the most, well, I don't know if it's appropriate to use this word, but your brain will literally link the most objectively stupid things you can possibly find and create like insane ideas that you wouldn't, like, how do you, that's kind of one thing that's insane to me. Have you found that there's like a pattern to generating those like really good ideas?
I think there's actually a term for it. Serendipity, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty much serendipity. Because like it's like quantum mechanics. It's like if you like observe something, or like you're like actually like focusing in on something, right? It's in a completely different state. It's in a very fixed state and it can't change, right? But when you're kind of looking at, when you're not observing it, it's like in this fantastic, like superposition between like this up and down sort of phase. If you guys don't know about quantum mechanics, don't worry. But basically, if you focus on something and like actually are like super like focused on it, right? There's a lot of like there's not a lot of room to like grow and like expand, and like if you're especially looking for ideas, you don't want to be fixed, right? You don't want to have fixed mindset. You want to have like this huge bubble of like things to pull from. Once you actually have your solution, that's when you go focus mode. And it kind of even connects back to like productivity and like how you should have focus time and like sort of like free roam, like relaxed time, right? In that relaxed time is some of like when the greatest ideas like happen. That's why we dream, right? We dream because we're not focused on anything. We're just like, our mind is just like free to wander, and our mind is like beautiful. It's more complicated than the entire universe, basically, right? I think there's like more connections between neurons than there are stars in our universe, which is still, that fact like still blows my mind. And my mind is pretty like intact right now. But anyways, so yeah, like I don't think there's even a pattern. I don't think we can even like put a pattern on it, because it's super abstract, right? Like that's literally like life, right? And it kind of even goes back to like us trying to like quantify everything with like numbers and stuff. I don't think we can, and I think that's the beauty of it as well. Is there's so much to like discover and like try. It's like is going back to the story analogy. It's like we write stories about things, right? And it's like, I don't think we're ever going to get to a complete 100% perfect story of everything. Like by the time we're like still alive, maybe like, I think we can reach like a 99% perfect story, but there's always going to be that little bit of information missing. Yeah. And I think that's great, because it still kind of pushes us to like do stuff, right? Imagine if we found everything about the universe right now. It's like, okay, cool. Show's over. Go home, guys. Like, right? Like that's said that, bruh. So that's what I that's yeah. Kind of went back to like a tangent, but yeah, I think I don't, so bring it back. I don't think there's a pattern. I think like we just gotta like embrace randomness, and like randomness is another topic in itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, just embrace randomness, and especially for idea generation. Yeah.
Yeah, there's this really good book that talks about a similar concept to what you're discussing. I haven't actually read the book myself. I've watched a couple of book reviews. It's called Scatter Focus. And basically it talks about the fact that the human mind is separated into two different modes of thinking, right? Like it's kind of like the unconscious and subconscious, but I think the author refers to it as like uni-focus and scattered focus. And the point is basically that it's kind of what it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, is the fact that the point of unifocus is to like collect information. Right? That's like when you're actually collecting the information, when you're consciously doing something. And I think one thing that's actually insane is like there's something like 30,000 bits of information that your subconscious processes, or I think it's actually higher. It's like 300,000. It's definitely higher than that. But the point is that your conscious mind can only focus on like 40.
Yeah.
Like something like 1,000th of that, and it's like and the point of that book is that there's so much power in your subconscious that we're not realizing. So it's kind of like, instead of always attacking the task, like definitely attack the task when you have to, but if you're trying to do something like create something new, as with the moonshot idea, right? Taking a step back, doing something completely else, your conscious mind is distracted by something else. The unconscious mind kind of like takes the driver's seat in that kind of thing and compiles all this random information it's been collecting, like all these billions and billions of bits since you were born, and then just creates these abstract things, and you come back to visit that topic and it's like ready, it's on a platter, and all you have to do is look down and be like, oh my god, what? Like what you were saying with the opera thing, right? Like you must have like obviously through media and stuff, it's like, you know, opera singers break glass and stuff, so somehow your subconscious connected that.
I think it was like from SpongeBob or something, like a SpongeBob episode.
Yeah. Yes, guys, everyone watch SpongeBob. It can change the world.
See, that's another thing too. What if like the dude that made SpongeBob, his desk was like not dirty one day, and he's like, you know what, I'm gonna draw a cartoon for kids, and like he did that, and that him doing that led to me coming up with this idea. Maybe like this idea, someone listens to this podcast and like goes ahead and, you know, reiterates it and ends up like not solving it, or there's other problems that come out of it, right? But going back to the minuscule things, right? But yeah.
Yeah. That's okay. First of all, I love how you can link like all these ideas together. Like it is just an amazing. No, seriously, like it's actually, I feel like that's a skill that a lot of, I mean, especially me, like we need to refine, is trying to link everything together into a cohesive picture. I think you do that really well. But it's one thing that's like one thing that you mentioned, the fact that the SpongeBob guy's desks was clean might be it's just mind-blowing. And it's like, maybe why was the SpongeBob dude's desk dirty? Maybe like he had to sharpen a pencil for writing something down. What if the person had never asked him to write something down in the first place? What if the person never been sent to ask him to write the thing down, right?
Forget that. Like
you can basically...
Why is he interested in fish in the first place? Because he was like a marine biology teacher. Why did he get interested? Maybe he like had a pet goldfish one day, and maybe like that was like because like he was begging his mom to buy something for him. Like his mom finally gave in and was like, you know, I'll just do it like this one time. He's not really gonna do anything about it. Like, what if that was his story, right? Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, I think that's a concept. Well, first of all, you can take that back to the beginning of time, basically. Like, what if the Big Bang never happened? End of story.
Yeah.
Like, eventually it all comes back to the very beginning of time. But I think it's reflective on a smaller scale in people's lives too, right? Like, I think we can all think of, like, one moment where if that one event or one day's events never happened, like, your life would be completely different.
Yep.
Like, just, it wouldn't look anywhere the same. And I think all of us definitely have those moments. Like, I know that I definitely have those. And it's just, like, it really gives you an opportunity to stop and think about, and it comes back to gratefulness as well. Right? Like, being grateful for all the positive and negative things that happen to you. Because it's usually the negative ones that set you on the path to more positivity if you play your cards right.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. You said something about no, I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, never mind.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, you gotta have like a notepad or something.
So, Yeah. Now, I don't really have a segue for this one, but it's just something I kind of wanted to ask you. So, recently you published a YouTube video, basically, on making a CRISPR lab in your house, right? I mean, aside from the fact that that title is just immediately like, wait, what? It was... Okay, first of all, just how?
Yes.
Like, where did this idea come from?
Yeah, so fun fact, I don't know if you guys heard of this thing, but it's called the internet. It's like this really cool network of like information, right? Yeah. So short answer is the internet. Honestly, literally when I was learning about gene editing, something caught my eye, and it was like gene editing kits, and I was like, wait, what the hell? Like you can do this like at home. This is a thing, and it like really like shouldn't be a thing. Internet, not like shouldn't be a thing, but it's not like this is like a normal thing. This is like one guy who was like, I want to democratize science, and he's kind of like doing this thing, and like he has like a lot of people that are like, you know, against his work and whatever, but so it's not like this is like a normal thing. It's quite, I mean, like I don't even think I need to explain that, but like yeah, so literally this was on the internet one day, and I was like, I can like just do this, and I know other people who have done it as well. Like now it's like, and even with COVID now, it's been becoming a lot more normal too. Like I know a bunch of like professors and stuff, they've taken some of their equipment home now, sort of stuff at their own houses. But so it's becoming a little bit more normal, but like still, yeah, for like a 17-year-old dude who hasn't even touched university yet, like on all this, is already like doing stuff that PhD people are doing, and at home too, and with like no experience. I mean, I have some experience with like, you know, micropipetting and like all that, like bacterial stuff, which I'm actually really fortunate for, but completely different story. Anyways, yeah, short answer to how, the internet and like online shopping, e-commerce. Yeah, that's the short answer. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some experiments that you've like already done using the lab?
So yeah, like I think it kind of it's a lot like what I've learned is that science is like a lot like when we talk about CRISPR in terms of like you know, like on like a day-to-day basis and like, you know, and stuff, and like conceptually it's like, oh, it's like, yeah, this is like a, you know, find and search tool for like genes and stuff, and it's like it's pretty straightforward. It's like, oh yeah, that's exactly how it works. But then when you're actually doing it like in person, there's so many like different things that you have to consider. Like it's not like that simple. There's like so many like other like steps that like need to be perfect in order for like it to happen. Like you need to, it's like conceptual science. I mean, this is obvious, I guess, but it still like kind of isn't when you're really like doing it. I mean, we really realize how complex and like delicate in a sense this system is, and it goes back to the stories and like the like integrity of the story. It's like we're kind of just randomly, like not randomly, but like it's still super delicate of a system where it's like we've figured out that like this is kind of like what you need to do to like make this happen. This is what we need to like add to make this happen, right? But we still don't really understand why. Like we still have like guesses, but like we still don't know. Like for instance, I was doing something with something called I think it was propylethylene glycol, PEG for short. And scientists still don't know why. Like it's used to like basically make the cell wall of the bacteria more permeable. Scientists still like don't have a definite answer for that. They think it's like due to charges and all that, but stuff like that, it's like we just kind of tried this out one day and it was like, oh, this works. I'll write this down for later and like use it later, right? So it's like we don't really have like a full cohesive picture of how these things work. It's all just super like you know like rickety and stuff. And then when we talk about it like on a day-to-day basis, it's kind of like this is super like, you know, 100% laid out, but it really isn't. Anyways, back to the point of experiments. That's kind of why what I realized is like experiments aren't just like code where it's like you just like change this one part of the code and like you figure out, because we don't even like really know the fundamental building blocks yet, right? It's like we're still kind of guessing that stuff. So in terms of my own experiments, I haven't done any yet. I've only done like the kit. It has like a whole guide that goes through like doing your own experiment with like it's kind of like the beginner sort of like experiment, like intro to like CRISPR gene editing, where it's basically you use CRISPR to induce a gene edit in the bacteria that gives it resistance to an antibiotic known as streptomycin. I think I just had deja vu right there. Okay? I think I said the exact same sentence in my video. It's kind of funny. Anyways, yeah, you guys should go watch it back and see. If everyone sees that, it's pretty funny. Anyways, yeah. So that's like what that's the experiment that I did. And it's a lot more deep than that. So it's a high level summary, but and the kid does have resources for you to like do more experiments, but I kind of just like I also kind of like made a bunch of mistakes. I kind of used up a bunch of the resources like too early. So like even if I wanted to, I probably couldn't do another experiment. But I still have like the kit, so I can see if I can try to. But and I don't think I'm at that stage yet where I'm gonna do something because it's still like a lot of money too. It's not cheap doing experiments. So and I'm going up to university next year too, so I can bug my professors for that some sort of stuff. Anyways, yeah. So that's how it's been. That's how the lab's been. It's not been too crazy, but it's still kind of crazy. Yeah, in a nutshell.
Definitely. How much do those kits cost? Like, I'm imagining that it would probably cost a lot.
Yeah, so maybe like not as much as you're thinking. I think that kit cost around, I think it was like $100 or maybe like above bit above $100. So it's nothing crazy. I mean, it's definitely cheaper than like an iPhone. iPhones are funny. Yeah, anyways, it's definitely cheaper than the iPhone. Yeah. So yeah. They're not as expensive as you might think, but they're not as cheap as you might think either.
Yeah. I mean, that's really good, right? There are people in this world who are democratizing the information that they have available to them. Like, it's amazing because once again, it goes back to the butterfly effect. Like selling those kits, it might seem inconsequential, right? It's like, oh, it doesn't really like. Okay, cool. A bunch of kids could do a predefined experiment, right? But it's like the real thing is that people are learning how to, like, first of all, they're first-hand learning how to do things, like with their hands, like, oh, I can actually edit a gene and I am the one who did it, which is like just mind-blowing.
I still can't believe
but
it.
It's also the fact that yeah. Yeah, definitely. And it's also like it's like, if I can do this, what else can I do? Like we as a society have the power to edit genes, right? And you are like actively partaking in possibly the next scientific revolution, and that's just, that feeling is just exhilarating.
It's the power of open source.
My focus, yeah, absolutely. Like my focus is in AI, and I think it definitely does feel like amazing. But I think there's just another thing entirely when you do think something physical. Like I think that, like when you click enter on like a screen and it like works and it pops up, it's like, oh my god, yes, that's so cool. But I feel like when you build something, like when you're building, like, I don't know, a car engine from scratch, like that is a completely higher order of feel. Like if there was a hierarchy of positive feelings, I would say like the feeling from getting something metaphysical to work is like a 2 or a 3, but like number 1 is like that making something. Like that is crazy.
And that's one of the beauties of human like ability. Like we're able to create things.
Yeah.
Like animals aren't, like, sure, beavers create dams, but it's kind of like this like predetermined function type thing where like they'll just like use their own like natural senses to create something. Like creating a company, it's not like it's or not company, but like creating a spaceship right from like scratch. It's not like we have this like natural innate sense to be like, oh yeah, this is exactly like I have a tingly feeling about how to build a rocket ship. No, you don't. You really like figure it out and create something from scratch, right?
Explodes on launch.
Yeah. So it's this ability that humans have that we're like the only species that can really create things.
Yeah.
Like literally, it's just insane. Yeah, that's why it's really powerful.
Yeah, I think yeah. Once again, as you were mentioning, like, I think that's one thing that's different about the human psyche when compared to other ones. Like I think Nietzsche and Descartes said something that the human mind, the reason that it's different is that it's a battleground of ideas.
Mm.
Like I think it doesn't really seem that, I guess, impactful at first, but like I was thinking about this more. Like I was reading this in a book that I've been reading lately, and one thing that I realized is that one thing that I mentioned in the book was the fact that ideas have personalities, whereas facts are just dead, like inherently dead, right? Like, I think that's kind of what you can say. Like when you were saying that, oh, we've discovered everything about the universe, it's like, well, then the show's over, obviously, right? I think that's why, because when you know something, it becomes dead to you. Like, okay, I know that 1 + 1 is 2. Good job. I mean, like there's not really that feeling anymore, right? As opposed to when you have an idea, it has almost a personality. I'm literally quoting this from the book, but it's kind of like mind-blowing, because when you have an idea, the idea takes on the personality of almost like its potential in a way, or like its impression on you. And whenever, and like ideas can be like you can war against an idea. If you find evidence, you have something to, like, I guess, degrade that idea in some sense, and then that idea is like killed in a sense, but you aren't. Like, your ideas can die without you dying. You can come up with new ideas. You can take on the identity of new ideas, right? And that's kind of what's different about humans. Like, if you told a beaver, don't make a dam, make like a 40-foot skyscraper, they can't. I mean, even if they had the cognitive power, like the raw IQ, if they didn't have like the consciousness aspect of it, like, can they really let go of an idea? If you know what I'm saying?
Oh my god, the consciousness debate. It's like, I think
yes.
Yeah. Short answer is I don't think beavers are as conscious as we are, or like yeah. And they wouldn't have that mental capacity. I think, yeah. I mean, like they would be like, no, I like tree bark. I will eat tree bark. Just go away. Stop bugging me. Like, you know what I mean? They won't be like, we can create a beaver hospital and like take over humans. Like, they're not gonna think about that. I mean, maybe like they're listening to this podcast, but like, yeah, I don't think they are. Yeah, that's like, I mean, definitely there might be like a survival impulse to it. Like, you know, when you, like, if a human comes and just like, we do hunt beavers and things like that, right? So if a human comes and just kind of kills like your, I guess, family in a sense, right? Actually, I know beavers do. Yeah, I don't know if they live in like nuclear families, but that's not the point. Point is that back to nuclear.
Like, if someone, but that's what I'm saying. It's like cool. Like, not, what am I saying? No, it's not cool. But like, if someone kills like a beaver's family, like, they're probably gonna have that raw survival instinct. Like, what? And the moment they want to probably rake your eyes out as hard as they possibly can, right? But it's that. And that's another thing. Like, why human evil exists is because we can feel pain on a conscious and deep level. So we know how to cause that pain on another level. Whereas beavers, it's like, you feel that pain, right? But you definitely feel pain, right? But the fact that you're not aware, when you're aware that you're feeling pain, you want to get out of it. As opposed to just feeling pain. Like, you don't actually know you're feeling pain, right? Like, you're not self-aware of the fact that you are hurting. So I feel like that self-awareness is what kind of creates that dichotomy where you're able to create literal skyscrapers and rockets, but also, like, the 20th century was a clear example of the other side, like the World Wars, Cold War. It's like, damn.
100% agree. Yeah. And I think, like, if I dive into consciousness like a little bit, not too much, because that you can do like a year just to talk about this, but like I think it's not that beavers. I think beavers might actually, to a level, have that consciousness to be like this is painful, and like, of course, like a bacteria would not know. Maybe they do, but it's such a minuscule thing that they don't know, right? Whereas bacteria, or like even like a monkey, right? If you take a banana away from the monkey, the monkey might take your phone away and be like, "Hi, it's like back to you," right? And I think they probably wouldn't be able to do that. And it's not because they're not conscious. They have a level of consciousness that's probably the closest to us than any other animal. Because like I think they're, you know, evolutionarily like our closest relative or whatever. But like, yeah, I don't think animals lack consciousness. Some do or don't. Yeah. Maybe it's completely tiny. But I think we are like, it's a spectrum. It's not binary consciousness.
Yeah.
I think
that's a good way.
I think we're on like the highest end of the spectrum. And like maybe it's like interstellar and there's like 5-dimensional beings looking after us and like they're like just laughing at us right now. But yeah, like
it's like you're at the end. It's like, what did you say?
yeah. So I mean, it's not like we don't know that they aren't out there or they are out there. So they could be laughing at us, or maybe they can't laugh. Maybe they're like 5-dimensionally like smiling. I don't know. Maybe
they're looking at our potential like characterization of them and just being like, what are they thinking? Like, how are they creating this idea of 5-dimensional? Like, maybe. Yeah. Actually, I had a question for you. Actually, like, just speaking on, I guess, like evolution and like consciousness and what makes humans like human. What's your philosophy for life? Like, if you have like a set, I feel like we all kind of have a set of rules that we follow by in life. Like, even if we don't explicitly acknowledge that we do, like subconsciously at least. Like, have you noticed that you have something like that?
So what do you like mean though? Like philosophy for life? Like what do you mean by that? Can you dive deeper? Like, so you mentioned like rules. Yeah. Like, what do you mean by that?
like, especially with, I think, moral, like, kind of dilemmas, right? Like, everyone has not really a moral compass necessarily, but something like a code that you follow by. Like, okay, like, I will act in this way in this scenario, right? Like, for example, some people would say that if you like in life, some people would say that the meaning is, I guess, attaining happiness. Other
Okay,
people would
okay,
say,
like that.
like alleviating stuff. Like that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, what is the core philosophy that you follow?
Yes. Okay, yeah, I've definitely had this conversation with a bunch of other people too. And I always go back to one thing. If people knowing me are probably like laughing right now, but not laughing, but like they're smiling. Yeah, I hope they're not laughing. Anyways, so my philosophy, it's definitely it's probably the conventional answer, but it's also kind of like unconventionally like articulated, I guess, or not even articulated, just like from like a different perspective. So I'm like pretty religious, so I'm a Muslim, so a lot of
Yeah.
my philosophy for life actually comes from that, from Islam. So in terms of like that. So anyways, in Islam, like the thing is that we are on this planet, or like on this earth, for one main purpose. Like there's other purposes, but like those purposes still fall under this umbrella, and that's like worshiping God. And that sounds like, oh, like bro, like that's like so like like religious, like monk type, all that stuff. But hear me out, right? So worshiping God, and like so worshiping God is obviously like like the I guess quote unquote ritualistic stuff, even though it's not like ritualistic. Like that sort of stuff. Like yeah, it does encompass that, but in Islam, worshiping God can be in the form of like being good to His creation. So like for instance, like planting a tree, or like being good to someone, or like donating to charity, or like doing something good in the world, right? So it's like people saying like ending suffering. That's a form of worship, pretty much.
Yeah.
It's not conventional, like go to the. I don't, we don't have temples, but I'll say temple. We have mosques. Yeah, but anyways, it's not like going to like a religious place, like begging for like worship. That's a part of it for sure. But there's another huge part of it that's like definitely like not as stereotypically common to like hear about. So my philosophy for life is literally just that, and I believe that like that's literally like the perfect life you can ever live. Like in one sentence, it's worshiping God, but in actual reality, it's like 1,000 different things you could be, not even 1,000, like an infinite number of things you could be doing to stuff. So yeah. It's all basically like stuff that pleases God. So whatever please God, that's what that's my philosophy for life. Is just do whatever that is, and that's a lot of different things, like I mentioned.
Yeah. What? Remember when I said that you were amazing at tying things back together?
Yeah.
Like that was like we opened up the podcast by talking about like how like I guess the greatest meaning in a sense is working to reduce human suffering, right? And that is like in a way that's kind of like your life's stated purpose.
Kinda, yeah.
Right? And it's yeah. And coincidentally, I've noticed that that's like a common theme throughout a lot of religions, right? Is that reducing human suffering is like something that all humans can agree on. But I think one of the things that creates conflict is that we have different ways of reducing suffering.
And not even ways.
Right?
Not even way. I think the conflicts between religions comes between the minuscule things. I think like at the core, if you've looked into religion, right? At the core, all religions, or all like the major ones are pretty much the same principles, and like the only difference is like the minor sort of like ritualistic aspects on top of it, and like all that sort of stuff. And, like there's also corruption that happens over time and all that stuff, right? So that's also there, but at its core, at its fundamental, and even not even like religious, just like even if you ask like an atheist, like, do you think that helping people is good? Like you can't, like no one's gonna say no unless you're like evil, right? And even evil, like I don't think like anyone can be truly evil. I mean, okay, maybe they can, but yeah.
I mean, true malevolence does.
Yeah, it does exist. Yeah, it does exist. It has to exist. But even for like short moments in time, it does exist. Yeah. Anyways, whole different topic. Anyways, that's yeah. At its core, all religions are the same, pretty much. If you like delve into it, but it's just the minor things on top of it that are different.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I found really interesting is that the principles that are dictated by like not I don't even know if they're dictated, but like the principles that are presented by religion are like the same principles that if, as you were mentioning, like if you weren't, let's say, a part of a religion, you would kind of intuit your ways to those principles because they're like, it's like, that's kind of what I'm saying, which is really cool about humans, is that it's like you have this innate sense of like what is like right, what is wrong, or what you should be doing, you know? Like that voice that's like when you procrastinate, like you should be doing, like where did that come from? Like how like that's kind of what I'm saying, is that it's absolutely insane how it's like you have a second self watching over your actions that knows exactly what you should be doing, that knows your full potential, and is constantly acting as that compass to like push you towards the good end, which is just like, I don't even think I can describe that with words.
You can't.
Like
It's a
that
feeling.
like we all know it, but yeah.
It's one of those moments where it's like
phenomenal.
show but don't tell. It's like you just know it, like people know. You don't need to explain it, right? It's like you just have, it's a feeling. And there's a lot of things in life that you can't explain. Even with numbers, like look at pi, right? You can't explain all of pi with numbers. It's infinite, right? I mean that's just a random
True.
example, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually once again that goes back to what we were saying earlier about the fact that DNA definitely represents life, but it doesn't at the same time. Like it represents biological life, but even then we don't know that.
Yeah.
Right? Like
yeah.
there's some things that you can't explain with A, C, T, and G. Especially if you can create new ones. Then it's like
Like what's
You know what I'm
what's the
saying?
protein for like emotion? What's the protein for love? Like, yeah, you can argue oxytocin for love, the dopamine, but even that really isn't the full story. That's just like
Yeah.
a name we've given it, and like that's a story we've told ourselves like hundreds of times, and we're happy with it. But it's a lot deeper than that, and there's a lot we don't know about the brain, right? And yeah, stuff like that. So we have no idea, and I think it's great that we don't have any idea because it's just something like we can constantly work towards, and even if we never end up reaching it, it's just like, you know, you got something to do. So yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, this goes to what you were saying, like it's the micro scale versus the macro scale. On the micro scale it might be oxytocin, might be serotonin, dopamine, but on the macro scale, when you combine all of these little pieces together, it creates that forest. Right? Like you can create a bunch of trees, but planting trees in a linear fashion is not what creates the forest. Right? It's like the animals that live. It's all of these little micro components that make up the whole ecosystem. And that, oh
That's
my
beautiful.
god, this is, I'm just, it's hilarious because this goes exactly, not even hilarious, it's literally beautiful. This goes back to what we were saying about even the smallest of things, the most inconsequential things, they are what come together to make life. It's those building blocks.
Yeah.
Tower is just building blocks.
Back to the forest analogy, right? Like even like that one minuscule grain of like dirt, and that dirt in that dirt, like a like microbe living in that dirt contributed to like another animal like getting sick or something, and that animal causing like a tree to fall down or something, and that creates a whole like river possible. Like this random example, I'm not like I made that up right now, but yeah, like stuff like that, right? Like 1/7 billion, back to that 1/7 billion, right? That just even such a small impact from everybody as a communal thing, like even like yeah, like 1/7 billionth of like a footstep, or like 1/7 billionth of the amount of pressure required to like rupture the earth. If everybody put 1/7 billionth of that, imagine like what you could do at the same time. Yeah, so yeah. Back to that.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that's a perfect place to end off. Like, if you're listening to this, you might be 1 out of 7 billion, but it is those less than 1%, that 0.0001% of people that ultimately aggregate together to make the end whole. Right? So I feel like, you know what, people might think that, you know what, I don't matter, this, that. But the reality is that you are a domino in a chain of dominoes, and you have unbelievable power. Right? So, yeah, look around you. Fix the chaos inside your own world, because that is what dictates the amount of suffering and the malevolence on this planet. And I think together we can all take the steps necessary for a better future as humanity, right? Like, no one knows what the future is going to look like, whether it's gene editing, it's AI, it's quantum computing. But while we can't necessarily predict it, we can be prepared for it.
And yeah, I mean, thank you so much, Adi, for having me on this wonderful podcast. This was probably the most wonderful, deep, and like introspective like 1.5 hours I've had like this week, maybe this entire year. But yeah, I think I gotta do this more often. I might start my own podcast. We'll see. But back to that domino thing, real quick before we like end off. Like remove that domino from the chain, and the entire dominoes just stop. You just end the entire domino chain, right? So yeah, exactly. Like you do matter. Even if it's 1 in 7 billion dominoes, remove one, and the entire thing just breaks. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much, Jibby, for coming on this podcast. It was just phenomenal.
Thank you so much. I'll catch you later, Adi.
Yeah, see ya. All right, so this was 3 Bucket Podcast, episode number 5. If you guys really like this, I guess like hit the like and subscribe button if you feel like it, or just continue listening. Fix the chaos in your own life. Cheers. Thanks for listening.